What we're going to talk about is bulletproofing your online business and could your business survive without you? Now, again, I don't believe there's ever going to be a truly autopilot business that you can just prime it once and it just takes off forever, like Tesla's energy machines. I don't know if any of you have ever studied Tesla and science. He had this idea of building a device that once you got it started going generating electricity, it could provide its own electricity itself and just be a perpetual energy machine. That was what one of Tesla's goals was when he was inventing these things to generate energy. And then you've heard of people talking about money pumping oil wells where you get an oil well started, and as long as you keep it primed, that will keep pumping out, black oil, Texas tea, or whatever they call it, to, always be, generating income for you. But even those oil wells at some point need maintenance, and in some point, they have to be shut down and then something replaced, or something has to be done, to keep them running. Even though they're pulling out a profitable item, out of the ground, that oil, there's some things that, that have to be done to keep that oil well going. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight is how we can bulletproof as much as possible our online business to keep it running for, at least a little while we're away, and steps that we can take to help maintain our business on its own. So we're going to talk about this subject, and like I said, this is a subject you hardly anybody ever even thinks of, and most people won't talk about it at all. They want to talk about how you can have an autopilot business that once you start it, it gets running on its own. You never have to touch it again. Like I said, most of the time that's hype. It's not really ever going to happen. Even if back in the days of AdSense, when you could find a good niche and put up a good blog with some content on it, some AdSense ads, and just through natural organics, getting search engine listings, get a steady flow of traffic. I guess what some people call, autopilot businesses. But as you've seen what happened with those, Google and the other pay-per-click search engines caught on to what was going on, that people were building the sites just for the attraction of people to click the links in those AdSense ads that were on there. So, they started changing their algorithms to where sites didn't rank as well, and then they also changed it for they didn't pay as well. So eventually that's all started to degrade, and it's pretty much impossible now to have an autopilot AdSense business. I'm not saying that you can't have one that didn't generate income, but it's almost impossible now to have an AdSense business that's going to support a full-time income now without a lot of work and a lot of websites. And again, even for it to work at that point, you still have to keep up with the search engines and their algorithms and keeping that traffic flowing. And most of the time in today's online world, it's going to involve some sort of paid advertising to keep that going, to keep people coming to your websites. So that's what we're going to talk about is how we can get our online businesses as most as possible to be autopilot. So what we're going to talk about, like I said, is the true automation of your business, preparing it to run without your intervention as much as possible. So, as online business owners, we all want to have the true autopilot business and one that virtually runs on itself once it's gotten started. But like I said, the truth of it is very few online business models could ever be autopilot businesses. There's always some point in them where you have to have some hands-on to maintain them and keep them going. No matter how much automation we have in place, like I said, there comes a point where you have to make decisions and take specific actions to keep your business running smoothly and profitable. Now, the last part, and profitable, is the hard part. During this past 2 weeks, I discovered, there were some parts of my business that, were automated and running on their own, but they weren't generating any income. Some of them were bringing in traffic, but the traffic wasn't converting as good as it should, and I was paying more for that traffic than what I was getting out of it. That's one of the things I realized over these past 2 weeks of some of the things I had automated set up were really not doing me as much good as I thought they were doing me. While a true autopilot business may not ever be really possible, you can bulletproof your business for sustainability for short periods of time. And what I mean by this is in example, like the past 2 weeks, where you could step away from your business for 2 to 4 weeks, or even, maybe 2 months, and it still sustain itself and be profitable and not be losing money, costing you money for it to run on its own. It's not really that hard to set up these things, but it does take monitoring things in your business and deciding what's working for you and what's really worth keeping and that kind of thing, instead of, just blindly letting things run on its own and then just hoping for the best when things are running, that it's going to turn out to be, profitable. So these are the steps we're going to look at in as far as getting prepared to have as much of an autopilot business as we can. The first thing we want to look at is automating or analyzing your income and your expenditures. Then we're going to talk about knowing exactly what your scheduled payments are. This is one thing most people gloss over, is they have monthly memberships and services and things that they pay for that they seem small, and you don't really pay much attention to them, but once you get to looking at what all you are subscribed to and the things you are paying for on a monthly or some sort of a scheduled basis, they start adding up pretty quick. And if you don't know exactly what they are, and even when they're scheduled to happen, you can get caught off guard, and maybe get in trouble with some of your payment processors, not having money in the accounts to cover for them. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is knowing your traffic sources and their costs. And then the fourth thing, focus on getting residual incomes. This last one is the one thing that I did have going through this past couple of weeks when I was away, that I seen that they were really helpful in having them. One of the things I've tried to concentrate on in the last, I guess, 3 years or so of my business is having more residual incomes. Now, I'm not talking about residual incomes in the, it's something, you get paid for every single month from anybody that joins. I do have one or two of those. Even the fixed term memberships, even for just, 3, 6, 12 payments, those are considered residual incomes because you're going to get a set amount of payments from, the customers, that buy into those. So even those, are considered residual incomes, not just monthly memberships that you have, that people pay for on an ongoing basis without it ever stopping. So like I said, that's one of the things that I realized 3 to 5 years ago, that I needed to have these membership sites. So I started concentrating on doing those, and I've got several of them going now. Now, I don't send traffic to them as much as I should. Some of them could earn a lot more than they do. I don't send traffic to all of them like I should. The ones that seem to do the best is the ones I seem to concentrate on, which I learned over the past 2 weeks. There's some of them that I should be sending more traffic to, and I could automate that traffic and see more of an income coming from those. Casey, and I've noticed that the autopilot, that the people that teach autopilot and on the beach or in a car always have a laptop handy, so they're actually working. That's true, Kate. It's like I was saying at the very beginning, when I first started staying at the hospital with my mom, I took an iPad with me, and I thought, I could do most of my online business maintaining it from that iPad, but I found out, yeah, it was great for staying connected, but then, a laptop or even a tablet, that had, more functionality to it would have been better. And there's just things that you have to do on an ongoing basis unless you've, got somebody doing them for you, or somebody, or some way of, automating it. And one of the things I found, even though you may see these people sitting on the beach and they've got a laptop or whatever, and they're doing whatever, and they're smiling because they're making money. One of the things I found is, you can't always depend on the internet connection that you have. No matter what you do, you're going to have an internet connection. At the hospital, they got free public wireless that you could use, but I noticed that it was really, really slow. So anything that I could have done productive wise would have been hampered by that internet connection speed as well. So even though you, like Kay is saying, you see these pictures of people sitting on a beach, and they got the laptops and they're working on things, you got to realize they're using some sort of internet connection too to be able to do that. If that's really what they're doing, those are most times staged actors on those pictures. They're not really doing anything. But that's another factor you have to think of. Is you got to have a connection. You could be at a point where you don't have a connection to work with. There was one place that I went to in the past 2 weeks that I had to spend about 36 hours there. There wasn't any internet connection there. Had I not had internet connection through my cell phone provider, I wouldn't have had internet connection at all during that 36 hours. So that's another factor you need to think of when you're away is do you have connectivity back, even if you have a device that you can connect back to your business with. So the first part, let's talk about analyzing your incomes and expenditures. The first thing you want to do is you want to log in to all the payment processors that you use. These are the accounts that you actually make payments with for services and memberships that you subscribe to. And you want to look and see how much income you have coming from some of these services and products that you're selling, and do monthly and quarterly profit and loss statements. Now, PayPal, ClickBank, and most all your credit card merchant accounts can make this information readily available to you. And it's easy to specify a date range and download it, and then you can bring it up in Excel and then work with it and see, if you are spending more than you're making or if you're actually showing a profit on what you're bringing in. This is something I do on a monthly basis with both my PayPal and my credit card processing, just to make sure my income is greater than my outgo, because a lot of the things I have are actually going through the PayPal account, but then I have the income coming into the PayPal account, and I have to know that I'm actually seeing a profit off of it and not actually constantly debiting back from the bank account that they're tied to pay for some of them services. If you see that you are doing that, well, then that's when you need to start analyzing what you're actually paying for and deciding what's worth having and what's actually a true asset to your business. But without doing this, if you just let things run on their own, you may not ever know how much you actually spend in a month's time. Now, once you have some sort of an idea and a grasp of what your income and your expenditures are, like I said, it's at this point where you can start to decide what you should be working on, what you should be focusing on, because there could be things in there that you really don't have to have that you're paying for. So that leads into the next one of knowing exactly what your scheduled payments are. The first thing you want to do is make a list of everything that's active that you're paying for, whether it be services or memberships that you're using for your business, and just have an idea, a good list of what they cost and when they come due each month, or whatever the schedule might be. Some things might be quarterly or yearly. Yearly things are one of the things that a lot of us forget about, and they slip up on us. Something that renews annually, and so that's something that you really want to know ahead of time, at least that it's coming up, and not be surprised by some of the yearly things, because most of the time those are the more expensive items, take a bigger chunk out of your accounts when you have an annual that renews. Once you have this list, you want to go through them and determine which ones are necessary and are helping your business to become or stay profitable. Once you have this list, you can start going through them, and you can see some that maybe they're things that you haven't accessed in a long time, where you've rarely ever used them, or they're things that have never generated you any kind of income or helped your business anyway. And those are the things you want to start trying to eliminate, just so you can streamline what you're paying out, so that your income, your profit and income loss comes out to the profit side instead of to a loss. If you've ever taken Jason Fladlin's 6 and 6 coaching, this is the very first lesson you'll go through in Jason Fladlin's coaching, is analyzing your monthly payments, deciding what is actually helping you and what you actually have to have and what you can do without. And you will be surprised at how many things, like I said, that it's really easy to join a membership site that only costs like $5 or $7 a month and not even think anything about it. But once you have several of those going, they really add up quick. And if you're not making anything from it, they're not helping your business in any way, those are the things you need to start trying to eliminate, so that you don't have so many of those adding up to your final total cost at the end of the month. One of the things I found in talking with people, that I've coached, they once they go through and look at their scheduled monthly payments that they're paying out, they find, usually 4 to 5, sometimes up to 10 things that they're paying for that they didn't realize that they were still subscribed to and that we're paying for that weren't doing anything for them. And then again, like I said, some things are annual that you forget about, that you don't realize, that they come due once a month and they catch you off guard and you pay for them, and then there it's in there again for another year. This happened to me a couple years back with a web hosting account that I had that I paid for on an annual basis, and I had pretty much forgotten about it. The web host didn't work out, so I didn't put very many websites over there because it was an extremely limited account and I couldn't do much with it. But it was really cheap and I didn't think nothing about it. And like I said, it renewed annually, and that went on for 3 years before I finally remembered to go in there and cancel it. So, I didn't keep paying for that year after year. So, once you have this list, it's easy to go through it and see at a glance exactly what you're paying out. And then once you have this list of seeing how much you're paying out, then it's easier to see the money that you have coming in, where you stand at a profit and a loss with it. And that's where you can start going through them and eliminating the ones that definitely just aren't helping you at all, that you're paying out for them and not getting any kind of value or income from them. So the next thing is you want to know your traffic sources and their costs. This is one of the things that most people start with is getting traffic to their websites and their blogs and what have you. And it's kind of not on any kind of a schedule at all. They try one thing for a while and it seems to work a little bit for them, but not as good as they want. So they try something else. So they're constantly trying different things. And one of the things that I found with doing that is if you jump around from one traffic source to the next, you never really become the master of any of them and get the most out of any of them if you jump around with so many different ones and don't stick with just a couple of them that are working the best for you. Once you do start to work with some of them, you spend a good 30, 60 days, getting the most out of the traffic source, whatever it might be. You want to see exactly what it takes to keep that traffic source flowing. What it may be the one that you're having to do something to gain that traffic, or it may be something that you're having to pay for. But you want to make a list of the primary traffic sources that you have, and then what it takes to keep the traffic flowing from them. One of the things I hear a lot of people when I'm talking to them, in pre-coaching, is they want to try to rely on free traffic as much as possible. And one of the things, I tell everybody, there is really no such thing as free traffic. Free traffic always has some sort of a trade-off, and it's usually the time invested in keeping that free traffic going. So in the case of wanting to automate our business, if you don't have the time to work for that free traffic, then that traffic is going to stop. So it would mean that you would need to get somebody else to do that work for you, or pay for some way of automating whatever it was you were doing to get that free traffic. So that's one of the things you have to know is your traffic sources and how much of your business it's bringing in. Because one of the things we have to have in any of our online businesses and websites is we have to have a constant flow of traffic coming in. Once the traffic stops, it means you have no more leads and prospects and new customers. So you have to have that traffic coming in, and you have to know exactly what it's going to cost to keep that traffic flowing, even if you're not there to maintain it, and what it would take to get it to keep flowing, even though you're not there to actually work on it yourself. And then again, like I said, you want to focus on getting residual incomes. One-off sales are great, and they're certainly what you're going to have the most of. No matter what you're selling online, you're going to have more one-off sales than anything else, because most of the time these are used as qualifier sales to get people acquainted with you by giving them a really exceptional value to begin with, just to get them to focus on paying attention to what you have and what you have to say, in hopes that you'll be able to sell them bigger ticket items later. But like I said, one of the things that I discovered over this past 2 weeks, it was the residual incomes that I had set up that really saved my business over these past 2 weeks when I wasn't able to work with it. If you've ever seen my Skype profile, the tagline I have on my Skype profile says that you haven't lived until you click the send button to make $500 from sending an email. Now that's just great, and that, it happens really often sometimes depending on what you're promoting. You can send out an email to your list and you can make lots of money from that one promotion. But the key thing to it is I actually have to hit that send button for that to happen. During this past 2 weeks, I sent hardly any emails out, mainly just notices to people, letting them know what's going on, why I wasn't having my webinars and that kind of thing. But I did very well. In fact, I don't think I did any promotion of anything other than, if somebody just joined one of my lists, they got whatever promotion emails were in those autoresponder series. And I've seen a big difference in that. I didn't have that affiliate income or the product sales coming in because I wasn't actively sending out, emails on a regular basis. And most of the time, those are broadcasts when you do that, which means you have to actually be there to send those out. So having those residual incomes that came in while I was away for these past 2 weeks, they were a real lifesaver. And like I said, that's something I realized about 3 years ago. I needed to set up some more of those and focus on getting people into those so I would have, some incomes that came in, even if it were just, like I said, fixed term where there were just, 3, 6, or 12 payments. Those are considered residual incomes because you get them on a scheduled basis for, a set amount of time. Even though, the monthly ones that never end are better, it's still, just as good to have, the fixed term ones. So that's why, I focused on trying to get some of those in my business 3 years ago. And this past 2 weeks, I was really glad that I did, because that was primarily what my income came from, was those residual incomes that I'd set up couple years or few months back, was those things. Email marketing is great, and I highly recommend it. That's one of the things I preach about the most, is you've got to be building your list, no matter what niche, what business you're in, no matter what it might be. You've got to be building a list. But the thing about having a list is your autoresponder series can only do so much for you. The actual broadcasts that you send out to your list, that are current with what's going on at that time, are what's going to bring in the most income for you. So when you're at the point like I was this past week, 2 weeks, where I couldn't log in to do the broadcast because I wasn't able to keep up with things and see what was going on out with, everything else in the online world, I really suffered from not being able to do that. But again, like I said, I did have some residual income set up, and then, that's what really saved me these past 2 weeks, was having those. Because whether you're bringing in any money or not, HostGator wants their monthly payment every month. They don't care if you've made any money or not. They want their monthly payment. AWeber, GetResponse, they want their monthly payment every month, whether you've made any money or not. So had I not have had these residual incomes coming in, those would have had to came from my bank account instead of from my debit account that I have them set up with. So having residual incomes, they really don't generate, take any more focus to make sales on those than it does the one-off sales. Although, like I said, you're probably going to have more of the one-off sales, because those are usually your front end entry level products, where you're getting people into your sales funnel, getting them to know you by giving them an exceptional value. But at some point, you need to be trying to focus these people onto either mid-ticket items and hopefully residual incomes of some sort, so that you can see a customer value out of them. If every customer you ever brought in, it was only worth $7, you would never be able to have any kind of an automated income business from that, because you would constantly have to be bringing in fresh traffic to make those $7 sales, and it would just take a tremendous amount of $7 sales to sustain a business. It's just almost impossible to do with just one-off low ticket items like that. So here are the complete steps that you need to follow to get things started with automating your business. Now, I have a complete report that I'll post on the replay page that talks about automating your business. Then I also have a product that talks about when you're finally ready to make the decision to quit your job and go strictly online with your business, the steps you need to take. And I'll include links to those on the replay page. Those are both really good programs that you need to look through. I'll admit myself, I need to go back through the quit your job one and follow up some more with some of the steps in it. There's some of the steps I haven't completed in that as well. but the Automate Your Business report is really great in explaining a lot more of this. But basically, this is where you're at with it, what you should be working on to get prepared for having your business to run on its own. Like I said, for short periods of time, 2, 4 weeks, 6 weeks or so. The first thing you want to do is you want to build out your sales funnels. This is one of the things that most people overlook is setting up any kind of a sales funnel. They depend on just one-off sales of a product and hope that they keep continuing to get new, fresh visitors to that one-off sale. But you really need to have, a sales funnel that has both entry level and mid-ticket items in it. It's not really hard to set up a sales funnel that that's related to whatever the entry level product is, to find additional products that you can sell that are mid-ticket items. Anything video related is generally something that you can usually combine with other things to make them mid-ticket items. And we have so much PLR video that's available to us now that you can really take that PLR video and really make some really good mid-ticket items from the PLR sources that you have from the video. So creating entry-level and mid-ticket items is really one of the easier things to do, and something that can be totally automated through your autoresponder setup is the sales of these two. Second thing is you want to work on getting some residual income earners, and these are pretty much the membership type things. Or one of the products I released recently was Facebook Masterminds. Those are really popular right now. There's several of them that I belong to myself, where they're private Facebook groups. So, you only charge like $1.95 a month to be a part of them. Those are great residual income earners in that they provide the content themselves, the Facebook Masterminds do. And that's, it's not much money you're getting from each person, but every time you add 100, 200 people to them, it's a pretty good chunk of income that can come from those. So you need to work on having some sort of residual earners, some sort of membership sites. Like I said, even if they're not perpetual and ongoing, the fixed term ones are just as good. It just means you have to keep bringing in new people into your sales funnel to keep making money from the fixed term ones. The third thing you want to do is you want to build out your email campaigns for longevity. This is something that I tell people in my SWR, that they need to start out their autoresponder list with at least 5 to 7 emails, and then build upon those once they figure out what the prospects and the customers they're bringing in, what they actually want. Build upon those email campaigns, because you can add to these campaigns, email or two once every other week or so, and the next thing you know, you've got a good 6 month, 9 month, or even a year campaign set up that can be evergreen, that once you bring people into that sales funnel, they will continue to get those emails for a long period of time, and you can continue to make sales from them. If you were to include the mid-ticket and the residual income earners, well, that would be your ticket into getting people into, the automated business that you want to have the incomes coming in, so that you can let it be true autopilot as much as it can be. Then the fourth thing you want to do is you want to try to find traffic sources that earn profit on each dollar spent, or amount of time that you spend on getting that traffic. Now, it wasn't a couple weeks ago I gave everyone that came to one of the A-Stage calls a copy of the $10 traffic method, and that is a really great system for getting started with a traffic source that, once you signed up with, it was all about Bing ads. Once you signed up with Bing ads, deposited $10 with them, they gave you $100 additional bonus ad credit with them. With that $110, if you really paid attention to what you were doing with the pages you were sending to people, that's a perfect opportunity right there for you to fine tune your funnel and not spend any money doing it, with good quality traffic through a paid pay-per-click service. Once you determine that you are seeing a profit from the ad spends, then that tells you right there that for every dollar you put in, you're going to make some profit on it. You don't want to put money into paid advertising that you see a loss on. Again, finding traffic sources that they're profitable, the only true way of seeing that they're profitable is to do tracking. And I did a lesson on tracking several months ago, which actually been about a year ago. I did a lesson on tracking. You should really be tracking everything so you know the amount of clicks that you're getting, what it costs you to get those clicks, and then the conversion of those clicks into either people that were joining your list or actually making purchases. That's the only way you're going to know with paid traffic sources whether you're actually getting a profit off what you spend. So that's one of the things you should look into doing is setting up some sort of tracking. And it's really the very basics of it is you could use Google Analytics will help if you don't have anything else at all. But there's lots of free tracking sources, programs you get like Tracker 202 is available for free. It's a little complicated to set up, but it's totally free to use, and something that you could be using. There's also lots of little WordPress plugins you can get that will help with tracking. But tracking is something that's really critical if you're spending any kind of money on traffic sources to determine whether you're actually seeing a profit on the money that you're spending on it. And like I said, with that program I gave everybody, it's been about a month ago, that $10 traffic trick, that was your perfect opportunity right there to start fine tuning your opt-in pages and your sales pages to make sure that spending money with Bing ads was going to be profitable for you. If you've seen that it was, if you've been doing it and you've seen that it was, then that's your perfect opportunity right there, because you can use a PayPal credit card with Bing, and the sales you're making from whatever it is you're selling going straight into your PayPal. So it could be a self-funding service if you fine-tune the traffic right and seen that it was paying for itself instead of it being a cost and not bringing you in any income. So that's one of the things you want to try to evaluate is traffic sources that are actually earning you profit instead of costing you. Again, like I said, free traffic is not really free. You're investing your time into it. And what we're wanting to do is have, a system set up here that really runs on its own. So if you're taken away from the system, then it's going to be hard to rely on free traffic because you're not going to be there to help it keep it going. Then, like I said, you want to automate the payment of the traffic sources, the ones that you are paying for. PayPal, like I said, is one of the best ways of doing this because they do give you a credit card to link to your PayPal account. So if you can use that debit card that PayPal gives you to pay for traffic sources, and if you're bringing in income, well then it's coming straight from your PayPal account, not having to come from your bank account. So if you were to follow these 5 steps, this is a great step of getting prepared for your business to run on its own. Now, there's still, like I said, there's always going to be things that can happen that are going to stop, and somebody has to deal with it. Like I said before, if HostGator goes down for any point in time, there's nothing you can do about that. Somebody has to, be there to kickstart things again. If you have something that runs automatically, if you have plugins or whatever that update automatically and they might cause problems, somebody would have to step in and do that. And then of course support tickets, somebody has to handle those because there's very little true automation you can do with support tickets other than auto response saying that somebody will get back to them within a specific time, but then somebody needs to do that. But these are the steps that if you follow just these, you can take short periods of time away from your business and it still be functioning and still be profitable when you came back to it. Now, it may not be as profitable as it would have been when you were there, just like I experienced this past 2 weeks. I wasn't sending out promotional emails, promoting any JV partner things or coming out with any new products. I've seen a big drop in my income from not being able to do those things. But by the autoresponder series that I had set up, and again, the residual incomes, which was key, I was able to see, a steady income coming in, and the services that I pay for monthly were taken care of with those things that I had set up before. So that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight. Like I said, during the past 2 weeks, it really hit me that I needed to pay more attention to some of these things, or some things that I had overlooked that I didn't realize that came due on a monthly basis that that I really hadn't paid much attention to them because there's always money in the PayPal account to pay for them, so I just really didn't pay that much attention to them. But when the income stops flowing because you're not there to keep it coming in, when you notice these things when they come in, if you see more payments being sent than money coming in, then you start to notice these things more. And these past 2 weeks is where I noticed some of these, and that's where it came to my mind that I needed to talk about this with you guys and make you aware that there could be a point in time when you're in the same situation like I was this past 2 weeks, where you're away from your business and you want it to survive on its own, even if it doesn't show a profit, but it stays alive on its own and doesn't cost you money, because you certainly don't want it costing you money when you're away from it. You definitely want it to at least pay for itself. So, if you follow these steps, and like I said, I'm going to give you an additional report on the replay page that talks more about automating your business. And then I'm also going to give you access to the Quit Your Job manual that talks about, once you finally make the decision to go strictly online, the things that you need to be prepared for as far as insurance and retirement and that type of thing that we didn't cover in tonight's lesson. So I hope this has helped some of you guys in some way, that you begin to realize, what it's actually costing you to do an online business and whether it's actually being profitable for you. Once you start to analyze these things and look at them, you will be able to see these right off, what is actually helping you and what's actually hurting you. And like I said, the ultimate goal is for, if you do have to be away from it for an extended period of time, that it does run on its own and that it doesn't cost you money while you're away. That's the one thing you definitely want to make sure, that it sustains itself while you're away.